And excuse me, sir, are you the expert witness?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, if you could have a seat here, please. All right, I'm sorry, I have to make sure he's hooked up. All right, we're back on the record in 2022 CR 2308. We have the previous interpreter from this morning. Defense, who is your next witness?
Your Honor, we intend to call Mr. Greg Joe.
All right, and my understanding is the state you wanted to have a hearing outside the presence of the jury with regards to this witness?
Yes, Your Honor, we're asking for a 705 hearing to determine his qualifications, whether his testimony would be, if he is an expert within the scope of his expertise.
All right. Could you raise your right hand for me, please? Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you give will be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right, you can lower your hand if you could state your name for the record.
Yes, my name is Greg Jellick, GREG JELLICK.
All right, defense, for what purpose is this witness being?
Did you want testimony first?
Well, I mean, I'm just wondering for what purposes he's being called.
Yes, Your Honor. He's being told for his general knowledge of intoxication, general knowledge of how memory is affected with intoxication, and general knowledge about certain levels and how they coincide with particular lapses in memory, what we call blackout, but I think they have a different term for them in memory, and why, number one, does it happen, and number two, why that would be caused specifically by the introduction of alcohol into the system.
All right, state, you may question the witness.
Thank you. Mr. Jellick, am I pronouncing your last name correctly?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So I just had a couple of questions. As far as your expertise, have you ever testified as an expert as it relates to the effects of alcohol as it relates to the formation of memories?
Yes,
In what courts?
I have testified in military courts in sexual assault cases where that has been a question. I don't believe I've testified in any criminal courts at this point.
Okay. So what is your understanding about alcohol's effect on the formation of memories?
Yeah, so alcohol, when you consume alcohol, will permeate the body and enter anywhere there's blood and water, and that includes the brain. When we form memories, we have a number of different senses that will grab information from our surroundings, and the hippocampus, which is in the brain, will bring those senses together and encode those first as sensory memories, then as short-term memory, and then if they don't know exactly how this happens, but if the brain feels that it's important enough to keep for long-term, then it will store that in what's called long-term memory. When you drink alcohol, as the dose goes up, it interferes with this process of what we call encoding, which is the hippocampus taking that sensory information and putting it into short-term and long-term memory.
Okay, so I'm just going to stop you there. What training and experience do you have, and specifically education as well, that relates to that particular opinion?
Well, I'm a board certified forensic toxicologist, so this is a part of the cases that I deal with that is commonly addressed, especially in sexual assault cases. I have a master's of science in forensic science from the University of Central Oklahoma. I'm also a board certified by the American Board of Forensic Toxicology. I have taken numerous courses in alcohol and drug related aspects of forensic casework. I've also been trained at the Borkenstein School of Alcohol and Driving, which is the premier course for training in all things alcohol related.
Okay. So as it relates specifically to this case, did you review any of the discovery?
I did review I believe, police reports that were involved in this particular case.
Did you review any video statements?
I have not.
Did you review any audio statements?
I have not, although I may have been given a deposition to review, perhaps.
Okay, whose deposition?
Actually, let me retract that. I believe it was maybe detective notes or conversations with the detective and the accused.
Are you aware that the accused never made a statement to police?
No, I'm not aware of that. This would have been in the police report, as I guess maybe what they gathered through other people.
Okay, so you reviewed police reports. Did you review any of the forensic evidence as it relates to any medical records?
No.
Did you review any documents or evidence as it relates to DNA or serology?
No.
Okay, so in this case, do you know whether any party or individual or witness was intoxicated?
According to the police report, there were witness statements that said that the alleged victim in this case was exhibiting symptoms of intoxication impairment at the party on October 11th, 2020.
Okay, and specifically, what signs of impairment did you note that you're relying to base this opinion on?
Sure. The loud talk, slurred speech, coming out of the room in a disheveled manner, confusion, and I believe there was some balance issues.
Okay, and who I'm unaware of who's made any of those statements. Who are you attributing those statements to?
My recollection is there was the people at the party, specifically boyfriend, sister of the boyfriend, and the perhaps boyfriend of the sister that was whose house that they were at.
Okay, are you going to, or do you anticipate testifying about the level of intoxication of any individual party?
My understanding is in general terms, there is no blood alcohol number that we can point to here. We can speak in generalities.
Okay, so as far as you are concerned, the testimony you're going to give regarding the formation of memories as it relates to the introduction, and I should say, and as it relates to alcohol consumption, do those vary depending on the amount of alcohol somebody consumes, as well as their body type, whether they have eaten, all of those things?
Yes, all of those would make a difference, and I believe part of the police report mentioned that the alleged victim was reported to have drank between 5 and 6 beers plus 2 shots. That would also go into that kind of opinion.
Okay, so are you going to say, based on that, you were able to say what her symptoms of intoxication would have been and what that would have been as it relates to her specific ability to form memories?
Again, I can speak in generalities. I don't have an actual blood alcohol concentration. I have asked for, an indication of how experienced of a drinker the alleged victim was, and in trying to formulate what would be possible, what kind of outward signs and symptoms you would expect, and what types of effects on memory that would have.
And so are you expecting to give an opinion as to that?
I believe so.
And what is that opinion?
Well, my opinion is that at the number of drinks that she alleged to have consumed would be consistent with an amount that would impair memory at a fragmentary level or what we would call an en bloc blackout.
So you believe that you can give that opinion despite not knowing her blood alcohol concentration?
I'm saying that is possible to opine based on a number of drinks that a person consumed over a period of time, and a generalized concentration of where you would expect somebody to have these types of effects on their memory.
So this sounds a little to me like you're extrapolating essentially and trying to form a BAC.
I have not done that type of math for this case. No, this is again speaking in generalization.
But you're extrapolating the results essentially of that, right?
I can speak based on my experience as to, a particular concentration or a particular number of drinks, particular that is consistent with symptoms of a particular blood alcohol concentration that would be consistent with one of those symptoms being memory loss.
Okay. So again, you're talking about a specific BAC, which you don't have, and you're not telling me you're not going to extrapolate to a BAC. And how can you tell this jury what those effects can be if you don't know what the number or approximate number is?
Again, if you consume a certain amount of alcohol and you're exhibiting certain symptoms of impairment, one of those symptoms is memory impairment. So that is well recognized, regardless of whether you provide a number or not. In this case, some of the symptomology and the number of drinks that are consumed would be consistent with somebody having memory loss. That is a recognized level. That's a recognized symptom of impairment by alcohol.
No. Normal.
And that's it. Well, from my understanding, your opinion correctly, that's it. 1 drink versus 10 drinks, right?
Well, an individual can start to lose parts of their memory, or at least have difficulty recalling parts of their memory as much as a couple drinks after they've started drinking a couple drinks.
And you're specifically talking about recall of memories. I'm talking about the formation of memories.
Sure. Well, so in the way alcohol affects the brain, as I said earlier, it's dose related. So at one point, if you drink enough alcohol, the brain's ability to move memories from short-term memory to long-term memory is blocked. And so you won't have any memories that are made at all. For someone who's just in the early stages of drinking, they can have what are called cocktail moments where they'll forget a face or a name or where they were in a conversation. But with cueing, a person can recall those, where they were in a conversation or this person's name. So it's a continuum that moves along with dose.
Okay.
All right, any other questions for this witness?
No further questions.
All right, the witness will be allowed to testify and people can bring up what they want to bring up on cross-examination with regards to his experience and the data he has.
Ready? All right, for the jury.
Everyone, please be seated. And And we are extremely close to the 1 p.m. start time. All right, defense, call your witness.
Your Honor, the defense calls Mr. Greg Jellick.
All right, you've previously been sworn. Could you state your name for the record, please?
Yes, my name is Greg Jellick, Jellick.
Defense.
Mr. Jellick, good afternoon, sir.
Hello?
You and I have met for the first time about 30 minutes ago, is that correct?
Yes.
We have had a couple of actually several conversations by phone. Is that right?
Yes.
First of all, start by telling this jury what your official title is or what your occupation is.
Sure. I'm a forensic toxicologist. I currently work for Spectra Forensic Services, which is my company that does forensic consulting or expert testimony. I'm also a research assistant at the University of Texas at San Antonio as I work on my PhD.
And so that is your continuing education right now.
Yes, I have a master's of science in forensic science from the University of Central Oklahoma. And I'm currently working on my PhD in analytical chemistry at UTSA.
Okay, and with respect to your job experience, could you briefly run through some of the things that you've done using your qualifications or rather your education?
Yes. So prior to entering the PhD program, I was the quality manager for Quality Forensic Toxicology, which is a private forensic lab here in town that does toxicology work. I worked there for 5 years, and prior to that, I worked as a laboratory manager for a place called Hill Country Toxicology. And prior to that, I worked for the county for 8 years as a toxicologist at the Bexar County Medical Examiner's Office, where we looked at fluids in just persons who had been deceased, or in cases of human performance where someone might have been pulled over for DUI.
Okay, so when you say the county, you mean this county, Bexar County?
Yes, Bexar County.
And have you testified in court?
Yes.
And have you testified for the defense?
I have testified for both the defense, prosecution, and both sides of civil cases.
And you also have testified for the federal government?
Yes, so I also work for different military entities, Air Force, Marines, where I will be called as an expert consultant or expert witness in court martials.
And explain just briefly what a court martial is for the jury.
Sure. In the military system, when somebody is charged with a crime, or whether it be a criminal offense or a offense against the rules, they will have a court martial where an individual faces a jury of their peers, much like this one, but it's in a military manner.
And as part of your education and work history, have you ever created your own publications or ever published anything related to the subject? And don't get into the individual ones because I think it's a lot. But have you ever done that? And give us
Judge, I'm going to object to the sidebar.
Sustained.
Give us an idea of how many articles you may have written or contributed
Um, there's probably about probably eight to 10 that I've contributed to.
and they've all been related to your education and your job as a forensic toxicologist.
Yes.
Have you specifically focused on or have a particular knowledge of how alcohol may affect either humans' reactions or humans' formation of memories?
Yes, this is a common compound, right? It affects many people. We see crimes and all the time they're affected and influenced by alcohol. So I have experience there, as well as I've attended the Borkenstein School of Alcohol and Traffic Safety, where it's a week-long intensive course where we learn about everything related to alcohol. And so through that experience base and my testimony in cases, that's how I've acquired what I know now.
All right, Mr. Jellick, and just to be clear for the jury, in this case, our office hired you, correct?
Yes,
And we paid you money, a retainer, in order for you to review this case and to give us an opinion. Is that correct?
yes,
Okay. And is that strange? Is that strange for somebody to pay you to give us an opinion?
No, that's part of my job duties, again, is working for whoever might need assistance understanding the facts of the case.
And you as a scientist, does that sway you one way or the other with regard to who's paying you or whose side you're testifying?
No, and sometimes the frustration of the attorneys that I work with, I'm an objective analyst when it comes to casework.
And by objective, you mean that maybe sometimes you have to give the person that employed you bad news, right?
Judge, I'm gonna object to leading.
Sustained.
Do you always give an opinion that is well received by the person paying?
No, as I said, it's what the facts state. And my opinion will be based on what I know, my experience, and what the facts tell me.
In this case, were you asked to analyze any kind of fluids,
No,
any kind of blood?
no,
Okay, you were not asked to analyze any kind of person's visual behavior with your visual observations.
I was not given anything specifically to visually evaluate. No.
So let me talk a little bit about what your opinion is on either perception or the formation of memory with respect to alcohol. How does the introduction of alcohol into somebody's system affect their memory or their perception?
Sure. When we drink alcohol, alcohol likes water. It'll move to any part of our body where there's water. And so when we drink, it actually affects all kinds of parts of and systems of our body. And one of those is memory. So there being water in the brain, there being blood in the brain, alcohol will move into the brain and it exerts an effect, an impairing effect on a part of the brain called the hippocampus, which is in the center of the brain. That hippocampus is responsible for taking all of what our senses give our brain and kind of gets them together, and the hippocampus kind of decides whether or not this is going to become a short-term or long-term memory. It first starts as a sensory memory. This is what our senses are telling us. And then short-term memory, it'll reside there for a while. And although they don't know exactly how this happens, the hippocampus at some point may decide, hey, this is important enough to hold on to or not. When we drink alcohol, though, it impairs that ability. At lower doses, it would affect our ability to recall memories that we've formed. At higher doses, it will prevent the memories from even being formed and cataloged at all.
So, and again, there's common knowledge that we have, and then there's the knowledge and experience that you have. At what point do memories start getting affected when someone is drinking? And speaking in terms of number of beverages.
Sure. So if we go to a party and we have a couple drinks and we're having a conversation with someone, we might forget where we were in a conversation. If we got distracted, we might forget somebody's name if asked to recall it. So after a couple drinks, we'll have little spotty parts of our memory that we're not able to recall on our own. But if we're given a cue like, hey, you remember the person with the black hair, then we can recall maybe some of those details. That's after a few drinks. I would say, 3 drinks. It could differ, and different persons will have different reactions, but in generally speaking, we see this below a 0.15. When someone drinks a large amount of alcohol that gives them a BAC of over a 0.15 on average, then they are no longer making those memories. They still might be functioning. They may still be able to carry on a conversation, but those memories are no longer going to long-term storage.
Okay. And of course, this varies from person to person, right?
Yes.
It may vary based on the strength of the drinks.
Well, the strength of the drinks goes back to the question of dose, how much alcohol you've had, and the concentration of those alcoholic drinks.
Okay. And in this particular case, you don't have, you mentioned a 0.15, and that's a blood alcohol level. We're not dealing with that in this case, correct?
That's correct.
And you had mentioned something earlier in speaking with me about a cocktail moment. Explain to the jury what that is.
Well, let me back up just one second. I mentioned the 0.15 because that's what the literature says. We don't have a blood alcohol concentration in this case, just to clarify what I was saying. In terms of a cocktail moment, as I was saying, you might forget where you were in a conversation or a detail of someone's conversation because alcohol is impairing some of that recall process.
All right, and then, we don't use terms like 0.15, 0.08 in general language, but we do use terms like beer goggles. Have you heard that term?
I've heard that term.
So I think that refers to the idea that after a certain number of drinks, your judgment and your perception changes. Does that coincide with what you know?
Yes, as we drink, one of the first things that happens is we start to lose inhibitions and our judgment starts to we start making poor decisions. Our executive decision-making ability is affected.
All right, and then the other term that I've heard and you're familiar with is maybe a blackout, okay? And blackout, I guess, would be a moment where somebody doesn't remember anything or large portions of what happened during a drinking episode. Is that typical and common? How do you explain that scientifically?
Right. So there's two types of blackouts that are recognized. One, the fragmentary blackout, which is kind of what I was explaining earlier about being cocktail moments, just pieces we can remember and pieces that we don't remember. And then the other type of blackout, which is just en bloc, just a whole section of time that we can't recall any details. Even with cueing, we can't recall. It was never encoded. And that happens at the higher concentrations.
So if somebody were to forget an entire episode or entire meeting with a person, would that be considered an en bloc blackout or a normal blackout?
If they can't recall meeting somebody,
Or seeing somebody?
right. Well, again, it probably would depend on whether one, it could be recalled with maybe cueing. They were wearing such and such shirt that night. Or if it was a length of time, like en bloc is a large amount of time. We're talking, hours of time, hour to hours of time. Whereas a fragmentary will just be like smaller periods.
Does rest or sleep affect any of that?
Part of the effects of alcohol is what we call central nervous system depression. It just depresses our body. It slows everything down. If you add, sleep deprivation on top of that, there are going to be additive effects like, my ability to stay awake or motor coordination. But I don't know if it would affect anything with your memory.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Judd, are you familiar, do you read articles, scientific articles to stay up with your line of business and with your the current state of affairs within your field?
Yeah, so I'm a board certified forensic toxicologist, so I'm required to take a certain amount of coursework, seminars, workshops every year, in addition to reading professional journals. Yes.
And are you familiar with an article entitled "What Happened? Alcohol, Memory Blackouts, and the Brain"?
Yes.
Would you say that at least this is one of the articles that's perhaps a state of the art with respect to how memories are formed? when dealing with alcohol?
Yes, so that particular article is a review article which kind of pulls from a number of different journal articles, the best research that we currently have in terms of alcohol and memory formation.
And is there such a thing as the transposition of memories? Let me explain what I mean by that. That you could potentially remember correctly something happening, but happening at a time different than it actually occurred. Does alcohol affect that?
Yes, alcohol could affect the order of events as you're attempting to recall that information from your short or long-term memory. The order of events can be less accurate. Alcohol is going to affect the accuracy of your recall.
And let me give you an example. Perhaps in a situation where you were intoxicated and you stubbed your toe, and then you can't remember how you did that. Would alcohol be the contributing, or could alcohol be the contributing factor to that?
Yes. Again, if you were in a en bloc period of memory loss or an en bloc blackout, you may not remember how you got that injury. That is very common. That could also happen in a fragmentary memory blackout, but someone may be able to help cue you, or you may see something like, oh, that's what I kicked across the floor, that dumbbell that was on the floor. So depending on what type of memory loss and whether you were provided a cue would depend on whether you would be able to remember that.
Could it create potentially false memories? Could you falsely remember how or why you stubbed your toe?
It's possible that you've tried to pull the different parts together to make sense of something, and it's not accurate.
Okay. And the common thing that I've heard is perhaps when there are a group of people that are out drinking, maybe the next day, some people are reminding others, do you remember when you did this? And they're,
Sorry. I'm going to object already to the leading nature of these questions.
it's hypothetical, Your Honor. I'm just setting up hypothetical.
All right, that objection will be sustained.
Are there situations, and it is easier to compare, when there are people that are not affected by alcohol and they're comparing memories to people that are affected by alcohol? Is that something that science can explain or alcohol introduction can explain?
Well, if you had a number of different people drinking and they were all at different dose levels, they're going to have different levels of impairment on their memory making and their memory recall. So yes, that would be common. But even outside of alcohol impairment, we all have maybe played the telephone game where details don't come as you would expect as well.
And so alcohol doesn't help that situation, does it?
No, it would make it worse.
So there's also a chart, and let me know if you've heard of this chart. It's a chart by Kurt Jubowski from the University of Oklahoma with respect to the states of acute alcohol influence intoxication. Are you familiar with that?
Yes, I'm familiar with that.
Is this generally an accepted chart that gives you guidance as to how levels of alcohol or the increase of level of introduction of alcohol could affect, give you different clinical signs and symptoms?
Yes, it's a generalized, large ranges that you might expect this a lot. A person's tolerance can affect their outward symptoms that they might express in the process of drinking.
All right, excuse me, counsel, just 1 second. Everyone just remain seated. Just give me 1 moment, please. Please be seated. I'm sorry about that, but when mom calls, you know, so
May I approach witness, Your Honor?
yes, you may approach the witness.
Mr. Chuck, I'm handing you what's been labeled defense exhibit number 2. If you could just review that without saying anything to it.
Okay.
And do you recognize that document?
Yes.
Okay, is this a document that you frequently use or is generally accepted in your field to be able to determine or reference clinical signs and symptoms with respect to alcohol introduction?
Yes.
And I'm gonna get back with you. Are you good enough to have this memorized or more or less memorized?
I wouldn't say memorize, but in general, you know, I'm very familiar with the charts.
Thank you.
Dr. Dubowski was a well-known toxicologist, and he's no longer with us, but his chart is well respected.
And you mentioned alcohol levels and how they generally translate into clinical signs and symptoms.
Yes.
We don't have alcohol levels in this case, but at what point, if you recall, does the introduction of alcohol lead to mental confusion, disorientation, things of that nature? And I'm going to hand back to you.
Okay. Well, that can happen at a number of different places, again, depending on how much a person has consumed. But in terms of confusion, I would expect that to start to occur greater than what we would call a 0.1, all the way up to, well, as high as you want to go without dying. I would expect to see, you know, confusion around a 0.1.
Okay. And what would that translate as far as drinks, generally speaking?
Judge, I'm gonna object to the relevance as it doesn't relate to this specific complainant or witness.
All right, that'll be overruled.
It will depend on a number of different factors. A person's body size, whether they ate, whether they're male or female. So it's difficult to say, you know, hey, what would it take to get to this point? I can say in general that if a person was drinking on an empty stomach, you could reach a 0.1. You know, if you drank like 4 drinks in an hour or two. Your body's also getting rid of alcohol in that time. So there's that factor as well, as how fast your body can eliminate the alcohol. So that there is a number of factors. But I would expect that, you know, for someone who's, you know, at a party and is intent on getting drunk, that we would see, you know, confusion to start around a 0.1 and like outright, you know, disorientation at a, you know, closer to a 0.2.
Now, you mentioned a couple of factors with respect to size of the person. Smaller would be affected more by alcohol than with a larger person.
Well, you can consider ourselves kind of like bathtubs. Our bodies, being the size that we are, can hold a certain amount of blood, and with that, a certain amount of alcohol. So a smaller bathtub, to get intoxicated, we would require a smaller amount of water / you know, alcohol / blood. But the larger we are, would require a larger amount of alcohol to affect our bodies.
And the other factor you mentioned was the introduction of food. If you had little to no food throughout an entire day, would that mean that alcohol would affect you more or less?
So in general, if you don't have anything in your stomach, and I tell my students this, most important thing you can do to avoid trouble is to eat something before you start drinking, because it slows down the absorption of alcohol. If you don't, you're going to reach a peak alcohol very quickly.
And then I think the last factor was the amount of time within which you drink alcohol. So maybe if you drink faster, it would affect you more. How does that work?
Well, I think of this as you have a finite amount of time maybe that you're going to drink. And it might be decided upon, might not be decided upon. But the more you drink in that period of time, the higher your blood alcohol concentration is going to get. And so, of course, the effects are going to affect that as well. And if you look at like the difference between a beer and a shot, beer has a lot of carbohydrates, a lot of sugar in it, tends to slow down its absorption of alcohol in the stomach, whereas shots don't have a lot of that in there. And so if you're drinking straight shots, it's going to be absorbed even faster.
Does the passage of time from an alcohol event increase your memory of that event or make it worse?
The passage of time, like,
Let me give you an explanation of what I mean. If I were to have, if I were to think back to my college days, let's just say the Saturday our team won the national championship. And I know that I was very intoxicated on that day. And here I am, 20, 30 years later, remembering that event. Would my memory of that event, could it possibly change? And would it be better or worse than when I was closer to that event?
well, I think it's well recognized in general that time does not make recall of our memories better. So I would say that time would make it worse. But also, our brain's decision to record something as long-term or
Judge,
not.
I'm going to object. This is outside the scope of his expertise as a toxicologist.
Sustained.
Mr. Delic, how far are you away from receiving your PhD in this field?
Well, they tell me it'll be in December.
So pretty close.
Yes, a year.
Very good. Congratulations.
Thanks.
Now, we spoke in general terms about alcohol and its effect on memory. You can't specifically state with any kind of certainty how one person would react versus another. Is that correct?
That's correct.
But do you stand by what you said today about alcohol and the formation of memories?
Yes.
And is it considered respected science, which you give the information you've given us to this jury?
Yes.
I'll pass it to Sean.
State.
Yes.
Mr. Delic, the first time we were able to really talk, in I think ever, I don't think we've had the pleasure of meeting, but also specifically as it relates to this case was just before the jury came in, correct?
That's correct.
So we never took, prior to that, never spoken about the opinion that you're going to give in regards to this case, correct?
Yes.
So as far as your duties, as it relates to, working in labs, it's fair to say that a lot of that was testing using scientific equipment to test the alcohol concentration or, using scientific equipment to measure something quantitative, right?
Well, I would say that would be probably 50% of my job. The other 50% would be the paperwork involved, but also when that paperwork gets into a courtroom, being called to testify, maybe make interpretations based on, a police report and the values and video that might have documented a crime. So I would say that it's very much a big picture, holistic profession.
So in what you're talking about, in those cases where you were called to court to testify after you've done some scientific test, you would have reviewed evidence, right, in those cases to deliver the best possible opinion on those cases, right?
Absolutely.
Right. So you would, if there was police reports, you would review those, right?
Yes.
Statements, you would review those.
Yes.
Videos, if they had them, right?
Yes.
Photographs, right?
Yes.
You would have reviewed medical records,
Yes.
any other scientific data that you could have, right?
Yes.
In this case, though, all you reviewed was a police report, right?
Yes, and whatever was attached to that police report in terms of statements.
Did you review any videos?
No,
Did you review any medical records?
no,
Did you review any other scientific evidence?
no.
So just the police reports and then maybe any related documents. Do you remember what related attachments those might have been?
Again, witness statements.
Okay, so there are no written statements in this case. So would they have been just the police report summaries?
Again, so-and-so said this.
Okay, and so those, you understand that those are summaries of statements, right?
Okay.
I'm asking, do you understand that?
Well, again, they're quoting from somewhere. There was a statement, someone gave that statement. So what you might call an official witness statement, you put quotes on it, it came from somewhere.
Right, and so, but that's what the officer is interpreting a summary of that statement to be. You understand that, right?
Well, if they put quotes around it, no.
So you reviewed something with quotes around it?
I'm not sure, but I'm just, as we're hypothetically talking about what a witness statement is.
Well, I'm not talking about hypotheticals, I'm talking about this case.
Right.
So what I'm asking you is that you understand that those were summaries of witness statements.
Again, you would have more knowledge about what documentation is available in this particular case.
Well, you know, I think it's important for the jury to know what you reviewed and specifically what you reviewed in trying to reach an opinion and give this jury the best opinion that you can, right?
Yes.
And so I want to know, and I think the jury's entitled to know, what specifically did you review in this case in order to render an opinion here today?
Yes. So my recollection is a police report that the investigator, the detective, had talked to a number of different people at this party and had brought certain statements into the document, which is what I reviewed.
Okay. Did you talk with anybody else that might have been at the party that wasn't included within this police reports?
No,
So just, so I understand, just the police reports, right?
correct.
Okay. So I want to talk about something that Mr. Flores talked with you about for a second. You were saying he was trying to get you to give an estimate essentially of when a BAC is a 0.15, low 0.15 versus over a 0.15. You said, well, 3 drinks should get you to a 0.15. Did I understand that correctly?
No,
Okay.
no.
Because you wouldn't tell this jury that based on, unless you had what the drink was, the alcohol concentration, if they had eaten, their tolerance, all of those things, before saying amount of drinks could be a BAC, right?
The number I was referring to is in the research. I'm not doing any kind of extrapolation in this case. I wasn't asked to. Ultimately, I'm giving you a general idea of what to expect. A lot of data goes into that kind of interpretation.
Right. So in this case, because what I'm worried about and what I want the jury to understand is you cannot tell them where Marissa's BAC is, right?
I cannot tell you what Marissa's BAC was at the time of the incident, no.
Right. And so you can't tell me whether she had suffered any memory loss, right?
That's correct. I'm not Marissa, and I've only been given what I've been given to review.
And you haven't, you can't tell this jury that she had any or lack of ability to perceive anything correctly or to form a memory correctly, correct?
My testimony has been in generalizations of when you drink, this is the progression of events that you would expect.
Okay. Now, when we talked about the effects of alcohol on memory, what I'm gathering is that really what you're saying is alcohol affects the ability to retain a memory.
It'll affect it'll affect the ability to retain and recall long-term memories. If you have an en bloc, like a complete blackout, And then in fragmentary blackouts, you'll have the ability to remember on your own a particular aspect of your evening, but you can recall it if given cues and if those cues are effective.
Okay, and so like, let me just. For example, in this case, if the complainant immediately reported to somebody that the defendant and was clear about who it was had touched her, that wouldn't be the inability to form or recall a memory, right?
Well, what we have seen and what the research shows is that short-term memory, people who are under the influence of alcohol can remember things that have happened within minutes. But there's a certain point where when the brain's deciding to move something from short-term memory to long-term memory, that's where it gets affected.
I think my question is really specific, so let me ask it again. I think it's a pretty simple answer, is that if the complainant in this case immediately reports what happened to her, that the defendant had touched her, that is not an in block or an inability to form or recall a memory, right?
It seems that she would be recalling a memory. She may not even later remember that she recalled that memory, however.
Okay, but if she immediately tells somebody that it happened, she's recalling that memory, right?
Something short-term, yes.
Okay, and if she continues to come to this courtroom and tell the same story, she's continuing to recall that memory, right?
Right, that'll be overruled.
So if she comes to this courtroom and tells this jury what happened to her, that's recalling that memory, right?
What she's saying she remembers, yes.
And so when she goes to have a SANE exam and have her body looked at and she tells a SANE nurse what happens to her, she's recalling that memory, right?
At the time that she's giving that, yes.
Okay. And if all of those things are consistent, it makes sense that she's recalling a memory, right?
Again, it's at the time that the person is being asked to recall it. Again, a SANE exam might cue a recollection in a fragmentary memory loss.
But again, that doesn't mean that she had a problem forming that memory and doesn't have a problem because she's recalling that same memory, right?
Again, a cue can help you remember something that you had difficulty recalling on your own.
Okay, so regardless of that, so let's say she is cued, that doesn't mean that she doesn't recall a proper memory, right?
If she's cued, she's recalling a memory, yes.
Okay. So if she's not cued, she's still recalling a memory. So regardless of the cue or not, she's recalling a memory.
Again, it could be that a person didn't remember and now cued does remember. And that would be consistent with what we would call fragmentary blackout.
So again, if they're able to recall multiple times what happened to them, it's fair to say that they are recalling a memory that actually happened, or is their memory, and it's not fair to say that alcohol is a contributing factor of that, right?
Contributing factor to what?
Here's the thing, is that you're saying, well, alcohol generally affects your ability to recall memory. Well, I'm trying to figure, why is that relevant in this case? Because she's told multiple people the same thing about what happened.
Prosecution is testifying.
Gotta be sustained.
So what I'm trying to figure out again is hypothetically, let's say she is telling the same story every time, recalling the same exact things that happened to her. Why is it relevant that you would opine about her ability to recall a memory?
Well, again, I have not heard the witness's testimony, but was there something that she forgot?
My question to you is that the fact is that what concerns me is if you haven't reviewed anything, how can you say that it is relevant for this jury to consider this recall of memories when you don't know if that's a factor in this case?
Again, I am speaking in generalizations today. I'm going with what I've been provided.
And that's been provided to you by the defense, right?
Correct.
How much are you getting paid so far to testify in this case?
I was retained at $2,500. That's $250 an hour. times 10 hours.
Okay, is that bill up to date today?
Yes, I'm still under the retainer.
Okay, and how much do you pay per hour to testify? Is it different than for reviewing?
No,
Okay, so the same rate, you said $125 an hour?
no, 250.
Okay, sorry, twice that, $250 an hour. And obviously you wouldn't be here testifying if the defense didn't feel like they would help them, right?
Objection, Your Honor, not relevant.
Sustained.
So I want to talk about cueing for a second as it relates to memories. Explain to the jury again what a cue has to do with the recall of a memory.
Well, we've all had moments where we've maybe forgot how something worked. Husband and wife talk about who remembered to take the trash out, and maybe there's something that comes up in that conversation that cues you to remember that's in fact what happened. I forgot to take the trash out.
So let me ask you this. So if somebody never asked where somebody's hands were when something's happening, but then somebody asks later, that might cue them to recall that memory, right?
Yes,
So if nobody asked the complainant in this case, where were the defendant's hands when this was happening? But somebody finally did and she recalls that memory, that's a cue of that memory, right?
yes.
Okay. Doesn't mean that that didn't happen, right?
Again, that's what they're recollecting.
That's cueing that memory about where the hands might have been.
That would
And
be,
that hypothetical.
yes, in that example, that's a good example of a hypothetical.
Okay. I'll pass witness.
Defense.
Mr. Jelly, you were never asked to evaluate specifically certain behaviors in this case, right?
Specific behaviors, no. General behaviors, yes.
So you were not asked to evaluate whether someone's particular memory in this case was affected by alcohol.
Well, I mean,
You were never asked to give a final conclusion with respect to that.
no, my testimony here again is in general in nature.
And is it safe to say that you would probably like more information before you were able to make those kinds of conclusions?
Typically, when I'm preparing to testify, I'm getting as much information as I possibly can to help the trier of fact.
So when the prosecutor asks you whether the presence of somebody's hands or not could have been a cue for a memory, it could have been, right?
Yes,
It could have also not been.
they could be remembering incorrectly.
So there's no one way. That's why we didn't ask you to make those decisions. It could be one way or the other. Could be a cue, could not be a cue, correct?
Well, I think in the hypothetical, it would make for a cue. Again, as to the accuracy of what's recollected, I'm not able to say.
That's not what you're saying. You're not testifying that one memory or one cue is more accurate than the other.
Correct.
And you really have no way of knowing.
That's correct.
I'll pass it on.
Just. I don't have any questions.
All right, is this witness excused or subject for recall?
Subject for recall for a period of time.
All right, the rule has invoked. What that means is you can't discuss your testimony with anyone. The only persons you're allowed to speak to are attorneys for the state or the defense. And just makes sure you're available if you're recalled.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Defense, call your next witness.
Your Honor, may I step outside to see if she's still here?
Yes.
And there is one exhibit that's still up here on the counter.
All right, thank you.
The defense would call Magdalena Elizabeth. I'm sorry, I have a lot of trouble with her last name, which is why I went to go. get her.
No problem.
I'll have her spell when she gets on the stage.
All right, thank you. If you'd take a seat here, please. Could you raise your right hand for me, please? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give will be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Yes. All right, you can lower your hand. I'm gonna need you to make sure you speak up because the court reporter has to hear, jurors have to hear, and the interpreter has to hear.
Okay.
All right, so if you could state your name for the record and spell it.
Magdalena Elizabeth Raras. I spell all of it, or just
yeah,
my last name,
to help the
all of it.
court reporter out. Which part do you need spelled? Last name.
IZARRARAS.
All right, defense.
Thank you. Magdalena, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm not gonna use your last name, so do you mind if I call you Magdalena or Maggie?
That's fine.
So. Magdalena, you go by the name Maggie, right?
Yes,
And you also go by the name Megan.
yes,
And so whenever we refer to those names, that's you.
correct.
And you and I have actually met before, right?
Yes,
You've actually been to my office
yes,
and we've spoken about this particular case, correct?
correct.
Maggie, how old are you?
33.
And how are you related to this gentleman that's seated to my left?
He is my uncle.
He's your uncle. And could you explain to the jury what the relationship is or how you're related to him?
He's my mom's brother.
Your mom's brother. Okay. And that would make you cousins with his children, right?
Correct.
Are you particularly close with Mr. Perez and Mr. Perez's family?
Yes.
And explain to the jury how close you are with that family, how close you are. Did you grow up with them? Did you go to
Yes,
school with
we
them?
grew up together.
So you hung out since you were children?
Yes.
What do you do for a living, Maggie?
I'm a stay-at-home mom.
How many children do you have?
3.
And you know why we're here today, right?
Yes,
Let me talk about, one of your cousins is, Carol, correct?
yes.
And that is who?
My uncle's daughter.
And is she about your age?
Yes, she's 3 years younger.
And do you guys socialize or hang out together?
Yes,
And do you know where she lives?
yes,
Have you been to her house before?
yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
May I, Your Honor?
Yes.
And I'm gonna ask you to look at that screen that's in front of you, Maggie. Do you recognize that house?
Yes,
And I'm referring to what's previously been labeled as State's Exhibit number 1. Whose house is that?
Carol's.
And how often would you say have you been to that house?
A lot,
Give us a number.
at least maybe 100 times.
So you guys are pretty close.
Yes,
And you've been to that house for what purpose?
for birthdays, to hang out, to pick them up.
And who lives in that house?
Carol and her family.
And give us in detail who her family is.
Carol, Kyle, her husband, her daughter Layla, and her son Ben.
And have you been inside of that house before?
Yes,
And have you been to all of the rooms in that house before?
yes.
So I'm gonna hand you, this one I'm gonna hand it to you in person, but been labeled as State's Exhibit number 10. I approach her.
Yes.
Take a minute to look at that. Is that a pretty reasonable depiction of what Harold's interior of the house looks like?
Yes.
Okay. Is it off a little bit or is it
No,
fairly accurate?
it's fairly accurate. She has another closet on this wall,
There's another closet?
against this wall.
Okay, so you would add something to that.
Yes.
You happen to know how many square feet that house is?
No,
Would you characterize that as what size house would you characterize that
an average size house.
as? Average size house?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall? Let me go back even further. Are there often gatherings or parties held at that house?
Before there was, yes.
When you say before, take me back, years before, months before,
Years ago.
starting roughly when? Use whatever reference point you want.
When I started going, it was about July
July
2020, sorry.
2020. Were there parties before that?
Yes, but I would only go to birthday parties.
Okay. So what started happening in July of 2020?
We would just get together
How often would you do that?
every week,
Every week?
or every 2 weeks
Okay. At that house?
at the house.
And what kind of parties were there at that house?
It was just cooking, drinking, hanging out.
And were there all the parties roughly at about the same time or were they different times?
Roughly about the same time.
Okay, what times were those parties at?
More or less about 6, 7. Dinner at 8.
And how long would they last?
Till the next day,
About what time the next day?
maybe 4, 5 o'clock in the morning.
So a party that lasted 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, it happened all the time, right?
Yes.
And so there was nothing strange about a party lasting until 4 or 5 in the morning.
No,
Maggie, do you drink alcohol?
no. Now I do, but not before I did not.
Okay. Does that mean because you don't like it or you're allergic to it?
I just stopped drinking. I have kids,
And so was there a period of time that you didn't drink?
mainly because I have little ones and I breastfed my kids, so they were about 2, 2.5.
And so would you say you stopped drinking? Did you stop drinking or did you reduce your drink?
I stopped drinking.
Stop drinking. For how long?
Years.
Years? Now, I'm gonna bring you to a date. In October, around October 11th of 2020.
Okay.
Do you recall that date?
Yes,
And do you recall the party that happened that night?
yes,
Tell the jury where that party was.
at Carol's house.
That's the house that we showed you previously.
Yes,
And what was that party for?
Kyle's birthday,
And who is Kyle?
Carol's husband.
You know how old he was turning?
I believe it was 30.
And who from your family was there at that point?
My household, my husband, and my 3 children.
So there was a total of 5 of you there.
Yes,
Were there other children there at that party?
yes.
And how many children would you estimate were there at that party?
About 6,
6 total or 6 plus your kids?
6 total.
6 total. Did you drink that?
No,
Were you impaired by others, any other kind of medication or any kind of controlled substance that night?
No,
What time did you get to the house?
about 6
Did you arrive by yourself or did you arrive with your family?
with my family.
And before we get any further, have you ever spoken to the police about this?
No,
Has a detective ever called you on this case?
no,
No one ever called to find out what your version of the events was?
no,
Were you drinking that night?
no,
Was this during the period of time where you did not drink?
correct.
Did you have anything to drink
Probably a soda. A big red,
on this night?
yes.
So you get there at 6, what do you do when you get, after you get there at 6?
I go inside to Ray's room and Marissa does my makeup.
So,
All right, can you repeat that, please, and make sure you speak up?
I go into Ray's room and Marissa does my makeup.
so point to the screen in front of you where Ray's room is.
Okay.
Where that little dot formed?
Yes,
Okay, so that's Ray's room. Do you remember if you walked in the front door or through the garage?
the front door.
How was the place already set up for the party? And what did the setup look like?
It was in the carport,
What was in the party?
tables. The barbecue pit and the stuff for food. The table,
Is that typically how it was set up?
yes.
Were there other people other than the ones that you mentioned at the party when you got there?
Mhm. I don't remember.
Were there people that arrived at that party after you got there?
Yes.
And could you give us a rough count of how many more people showed up?
Maybe about 8.
8 additional people.
Mhm.
All right, so you go into the room and you said you, who was doing your makeup?
Marissa,
Marissa Salazar.
yes.
And who is she?
Ray's girlfriend,
And why would she be doing your makeup?
and she does really nice makeup.
And how long do you think that process took?
About an hour and a half, maybe.
Were you in the room the whole time?
Yes,
Was she drinking while she was in the room?
I don't remember.
You don't remember? Was she doing anything else other than your makeup while you were there?
No,
And so what time do you think you were done and left Ray's room?
about 8.
About 8-ish.
Mhm.
Was she sleeping when you walked in, or what was she doing when you walked in there?
No, she was just in the room. She was hanging out in the room.
Was she in pajamas?
She was just hanging out in the room.
Bring the microphone up just. Was she in pajamas?
No,
Do you remember what she was wearing?
she was wearing a skirt.
When you left the room after your makeup was complete, what did she do?
She stayed in there for a while,
When you say a while, how long is the while?
maybe 20 minutes.
What did you do?
Go outside.
Was it already dark?
I don't think so.
And what did you go outside for?
To eat dinner. To eat dinner.
Okay, who was out there?
Carol's family, my family, my aunt, my cousins, Kyle's parents, Ray's friend, and I believe of a couple that was a friend of Kyle's when they were in the military.
So that there was more people now,
Mhm. Yes,
and what were they doing outside?
eating dinner.
Was there any drinking going on?
Yes,
And do you remember who was drinking?
I know for sure at my table, Kyle was drinking, Carol was drinking, Marissa was drinking, Ray was drinking, my husband was drinking. Check his Ray's friend was drinking. I think that's it. At our table, that was it.
Okay, so let me rephrase it a different way. At your table, was there anybody that was not drinking?
Myself, my aunt, and
Who's
her,
your aunt?
my Uncle Ray's daughter. It's a wife and his daughters.
So your aunt is Uncle Ray's wife. Okay, do you see her in this courtroom today?
Yes, she's sitting behind you.
Okay, behind me.
Yes,
All right, and you're saying that she was not drinking.
no,
And of course, the minors, girls were not drinking.
yes, correct.
But you're also saying that the two younger daughters were outside?
Object to leaving.
Sustained.
I'm sorry, who else was outside?
His daughters, the two younger daughters, Carla and Lucy.
What are their names again?
Carla and Lucy,
You know how old they are?
21 and 18, maybe. I'm guessing. No, I don't think she's 21. I think she's like 19.
Okay, you're not sure,
No.
but around that age.
Mhm.
And they were outside,
Yes,
sure.
yes.
Did they remain outside most of the party, or did they move around? What do you remember about that?
No, they were outside most of the party, if not all the party.
Did you ever see them go inside and play with the younger kids?
No,
What were people drinking while you were around that time?
they were drinking Dos Equis. They were drinking Michelob. They were drinking shots of Ramchata and Fireball.
That's pretty specific. Do you remember exactly the brand of alcohol they were drinking?
Because they drink the same beer and the same brands all the time.
All right, were particular people drinking particular brands or?
My husband, Carol, and Kyle drink Dos Equis. Cheque and Marissa drink Michelob.
All right, and was there a limited amount of beer there?
No,
Was anybody counting drinks or how many drinks people were having?
no,
What? You know how many drinks, let's say your husband had,
no,
or how many drinks Kyle had?
no.
Do you have a guess as to how many, roughly how many?
I would say at least over 10.
Is that normal?
Yes,
Was it, how about Kyle? How many did he have?
the same,
How about Marissa? How many do you think she had?
probably about the same
10 drinks or 10 beers?
beers.
And so were the shots being served apart from the beer?
Yes,
Who was serving the shots?
Ray,
Ray,
my cousin.
Mr. Cheque, call him Cheque.
I call him Cheque.
All right, so time out, everyone. The court reporter has to take down everything that's being said. So when you all speak over each other, it makes it hard for her. And remember, everything that everybody is saying, the interpreter has to translate. So she has to translate what the attorney is saying, what I'm saying, what you're saying. So let's make her job easy. Let's make the court jobs easy. So I want everybody to speak up and not speak over each other. Okay?
Okay.
All right. You may continue.
So Maggie, when you say 10 beers, that's not a precise, I mean, you weren't counting beers, were you?
No,
But that's a guess of, a good guess of what you saw.
yes,
And is also a good guess of what normally people drink at those parties?
yes.
How many shots do you think people were taking? From what you remember,
At least 6 to 8.
per person,
Yes. That's rounds.
6 to 8 rounds of shots.
Yes,
Was your husband participating? in that?
yes,
Was Kyle participating in that?
yes,
Was Marissa participating in that?
yes.
All right, did she or anybody else turn away shots while there were rounds going on?
No,
There was really no reason to, was it?
no.
Object to the sidebar.
Sustained.
That's a lot of alcohol. Would you agree?
Yes,
Object to leading.
Sustained.
Was that the typical amount of alcohol that was involved in that party?
yes,
Was there anything abnormal about the amount of alcohol that was consumed that day?
no,
Was there anything abnormal about the hours that that party lasted that day?
no,
So how long? What was the next thing that happened at that party after you guys ate?
after dinner, we had cake. We sing happy birthday, we had cake, and then we just stayed outside talking.
So I'm gonna try and pin down, if you remember some of these times. What time were you guys eating approximately?
About 8,
8 p.m.
yes,
And what time did you guys start eating the cake?
maybe 10,
Was your uncle Ray present at that time?
no,
He was not at the party.
no,
Was his wife at the party, your aunt?
yes.
But what's the next thing you remember after you guys cut the cake?
After we cut the cake, my aunt was upset because
Object to hearsay.
You're not allowed to say what someone else said. You understand?
yes,
All right, so that objection will be sustained.
So you can tell us what happened, just don't tell us what somebody else said. So what happened after 10?
after 10,
Anything that you can tell us that would give you a timeline or a refresher? Did anybody else show up? Did anybody leave?
my uncle got there about 2 in the morning.
2 in the morning.
Mhm.
That's a big jump. Let me ask you this. Was there anything significant that happened between 10 at night and 2 in the morning?
Besides my aunt getting upset.
Well, let's talk about that. So you're saying your aunt was upset.
Mhm.
And why was she upset? Without telling me what anybody said.
Without telling you what anybody said. They.
Let me ask you this. Your aunt was upset, and what did she do as a result of her being upset?
She moved Perla from sitting next to, between Marissa and Ray to sitting next to her.
Was she upset at Marissa?
Yes,
Was she upset? Well, why was she upset at Marissa?
Objection calls for hearsay.
We're not asking you to say what she said, but why was she upset with Marissa?
Objection calls for speculation.
All right. You're only to testify to what you observed. You're not allowed to testify as to what anyone said. Do you understand?
can I say she just said something that made her upset?
No. You're not allowed to testify to anything that anyone said, okay?
Okay,
All right, so the objection is sustained.
So, and what did your aunt's name?
Guadalupe?
Guadalupe. So Guadalupe was upset,
Yes,
and she was upset at Marissa.
yes.
And as a result of that, she moved away
Perla,
from, she moved one of her daughters away from Marissa.
Object to leading.
Sustained.
So what did she do as a result of her being upset?
she made Perla sit next to her.
And Perla is one of the younger women at that party.
Yes,
What time do you think that happened?
Maybe 10:30, 11.
So that was still relatively soon after the cake, maybe?
Yes,
And were you at the same or close to Marissa during that time?
sitting
Yes.
somewhat.
It was only 2 tables,
I
right?
only takes.
So you were sitting at that same table with Marissa.
Yes,
How was her behavior at that time?
loud, drunk
Loud
and drunk.
and drunk. Okay. Was that what upset? Guadalupe?
Objection calls for speculation.
Sustained.
So what else did you observe about Marissa around that time, between 10 and let's say midnight?
That she was drunk.
Would you say in your words that she was buzzed?
No, she was drunk.
So to you, that's a difference, right?
Yes,
Okay, in your opinion, she was not buzzed.
no,
Was there a point in time where she left,
no,
when she left the table, when Marissa left the table?
when check-in took her inside,
Okay, so what time do you think that was?
maybe 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning.
So from 10:30, you're saying that she was already drunk, right? She stayed there till about 2:30, you said?
About
Okay. What was she doing during that period of time?
talking, drinking,
So just participating in the party.
participating in the party.
Anything strange happened then?
No,
Had your uncle arrived yet?
before she went to bed, yes,
Yes. So he did arrive before she went.
yes,
And you're sure about it?
yes,
And again, you were sober.
yes,
You had not taken any beers or shots or
no,
any other substances that
no,
would have impaired your memories.
no.
Do you remember what time your uncle got there?
About 2,
About 2 in the morning.
2:30, yeah,
And when you say your uncle, we're talking about Mr. Jose Raymundo Perez sitting to my left over here.
yes,
When he arrived, was Guadalupe, his wife, still there?
yes,
You sure about it?
yes.
So she was still there. He arrived. Okay, what do you remember happening next?
He served him a plate of food and he sat down too.
And did Mr. Jose Raymundo Perez come by himself?
Yes,
And what happened next with Marissa?
Marissa.
I'm sorry.
I said with Marissa,
Yes. Around that period of time,
nothing. She went inside.
she went inside, okay, and
Yes.
did she go inside by herself?
No, Ray took her in. Check it.
Okay. Ray took her inside.
Yes,
Was she, had she stopped drinking by that time?
I don't think so.
Are you not sure, or you don't remember?
I don't remember.
So was she intoxicated when she went inside?
Yes,
How do you know
because he had to walk her inside.
that? Was she, I mean, describe to us, the jury wasn't there, you have to describe to them what you saw.
Well, I walked in first because my makeup was in her room. So I walked in to get my makeup from her room. And when I was grabbing my stuff, he was walking next to her, holding her to the bed.
Why did you go get your makeup?
So that there was not gonna be a reason to go back in the room.
But you already knew she was going to the room, right?
Yes.
Okay. My question is, from the point where she was sitting down to the time she got to the room, what did you observe of Marissa?
I only observed her once she walked in the room behind me.
You did not see that then.
No,
And so you went to the room, are you sure you went to the room when she went to bed?
yes,
Absolutely positive.
yes,
And what did you go to the room for?
to grab my makeup.
And when you say grab your makeup, was it in a bag, a box?
I had about 2 totes of makeup
And why did you do that?
so that no one has to go back in the room when she's asleep.
So you thought you were never gonna see her again that night.
Correct.
And so when you got to that room to get your makeup, who was there?
My son and Checa's son.
Are you sure about that?
Yes,
So when you say your son and check his son, those are young boys, right?
yes.
How old are they?
My son would have been 11. I'm not sure how old Ray's son is, but he's younger than mine.
So, but they were young kids.
Yes,
What were they doing in it?
playing video games.
On portable machines, on TV, or
I think it was a portable machine because they were on the floor.
and so, explain to me what happened. in the room?
I picked up my makeup from bed, grabbed my bags, and I told my son to leave the room
Why?
so that my children would not be in there when she's asleep.
And did you stay there until she came into the room?
Yeah, she was in the room when I kicked my son out.
And what did you see with her and Ray?
Ray laid her down on the bed and then she flipped herself over to the side. And since she was wearing a mini skirt, her butt was showing. And I looked at Ray, he just looked down at her and covered her with a blanket.
What do you mean about show?
Her mini skirt was up and you can see her butt.
I mean, completely up?
No, a part of it. Well, it's a mini skirt. If you turn to the side at a certain point, it'll show your butt.
And that's what happened then.
Yes.
Okay, who stayed in that room?
Ray and I believe Malachi,
So
Ray's son.
one of the other kids stayed in there,
When I put my son, he was still in the room.
and you're sure about that?
Yes.
So where did you go after that?
Back outside to the tables.
What did you do with your belongings?
I put him outside next to where we're sitting
At the same tables in the patio?
in the patio, but the table off to the side.
And what do you remember next?
Nothing. We were just out there still. Everybody was still drinking, laughing, talking.
What was the next significant thing that you remember?
When Marissa came outside and she just sat down.
So do you remember what time that was?
And maybe 4 o'clock in the morning. Well, in between that, I think it was in between that Kyle went inside and he threw up first
And how do you know that?
because he was drunk. He
How do you know
said
threw up?
he had to throw up.
So he said it before he did it.
Yes,
And how many times did he go inside to throw up?
twice,
And how do you know that?
because both times he said the same thing.
And how long did he stay inside while he was throwing up?
The first time he took longer, maybe 30 minutes, 45 minutes.
And Kyle is who?
Carol's husband.
So let's talk about when Marissa came out.
Okay.
You remember roughly when that was?
Maybe 3, 4 in the morning.
You don't know, but you're guessing about 3 or 4 in the morning.
Yes.
And describe to the jury in very good detail what happened, what you saw.
She came, she sat at the chair at the end of the table. And I said something to her and she didn't respond to me. And Cheka said,
Object to the hearsay.
Don't tell me what they said.
Sustained.
Just tell me what you saw.
Excuse me. I'm sorry.
All right, so here's the thing, everybody. There's gonna be one person speaking at a time. We're not gonna speak over each other. When someone makes an objection, my job is to make a ruling over that objection. So state your objection is sustained. Witness, you're not allowed to say what other people are saying. Ask your next question.
All right, so describe to us what you saw, not what people said.
Okay.
So you start with Marissa coming out.
Marissa came out, she sat at the table. I said something to her, she didn't respond. And we just kept going about our conversation.
Did people joke about her condition, her state?
Object calls for hearsay.
Sustained.
You don't tell me what they said, but was there joking about her condition and what she looked like?
Objection. Hearsay, then,
Sustained. Everyone, just one moment.
So. Did she speak to anybody while she was out there?
No,
Did people try to speak to her while she was out?
just myself.
Did she look Describe to the jury what she looked like.
She looked spaced out.
Did she try to speak to Ray?
No.
Is she sure about it?
Yes.
Did she try to speak to Kyle?
No.
When you say spaced out, tell us what spaced out means.
To me,
Yes.
she looked, I don't know, can I say it like that?
Whatever you saw.
She looked like she was high on drugs.
You didn't see her use drugs.
No.
And what experience do you have with seeing somebody that's high?
Object. Relevance, speculation.
Overruled.
What experience do you have with seeing people that are high?
My mom, well, I grew up on the west side, down the courts, and people outside my mom's store always shoot up. And then they're just thrown out there on the floor.
We're not saying that she shot up or anything like that.
No,
What you're telling the jury is that's the look she had on her.
that's the look she had on her face.
In fact, you don't know if she was high.
No,
You're just using that as a reference.
as a reference.
How long did she last out there?
Maybe tops 20, 30 minutes.
Did she do anything while she was out?
No,
Did not eat food?
no,
Did not drink?
no,
And did not sleep there, by the way.
no.
What happened next?
She got up and she went inside.
What was significant about her getting up? What do you remember that you can tell the jury?
When she got up, she was wrapped wrongly in a blanket. And the blanket was twisted on her back, and you can see her butt hanging out, her butt cheek. Her skirt was lifted half, like on one of her butt cheeks.
Okay. And so she had been sitting down like that?
Yes,
And were the chairs metal or plastic?
metal.
And did she make any attempts to correct her clothing or her blanket?
No,
Anybody tell her anything?
no,
Anybody follow her back to her room?
no,
Was your aunt there at that time?
No.
And you were also there for the commotion that happened towards the end of the night, correct?
yes,
Did that happen immediately after this?
no,
Did it happen 10 minutes after this?
no.
How soon or how long was the period of time before the commotion happened?
At least an hour. Because by then Kyle had already gone back inside to throw up. That's the second time he went back
Sure
in.
about the time.
Yes,
Are you sure it was an hour, at least an hour after she went inside?
Object to asked and answered.
Sustained.
So what happened in that hour after she left and went inside
Kyle got up and went to the throw up.
the second time?
Yes, the second
Do
time.
you remember what time that was?
No,
What's happening with the rest of the party, with the rest of the people that are there?
they're still drinking, talking.
Are y'all playing games? Is there anything else going on?
No, we're not playing games.
Now, is everybody using the same bathroom at that house?
Everyone except Kyle, when he throws up, he went to his bedroom
And how do you know that?
because my husband and my uncle and Ray were still going in to use the bathroom.
Which bathroom are they using?
The one next to the dining room.
Put a little X on that. Is that also the bathroom that you were using?
Yes,
And everybody else at that house,
yes,
including your children?
yes.
Were you monitoring when the children went in and out of the bathroom?
No, the children were all inside.
But you just didn't see when they went?
No,
So how long was it before you saw Marissa again?
Maybe days.
No, no, I mean, from this scenario here,
After,
after she went inside,
I didn't see her for days.
you didn't see her come out again?
No,
So what happened next at that party?
I saw someone pacing in up and down on the inside of through the inside of the house.
And how long after Marissa went inside with that?
Maybe about an hour.
All right, and so what happened after that? After you saw the pacing?
Kyle came out from the kitchen door in the garage and he called Ray over. And then Ray went inside.
And is that when all the dust up happened?
Yes.
Did you hear what people were telling each other?
Yes. What was being yelled?
All right. Did you go join whatever was happening there?
No,
Who was sitting at the table with you at the time when all that was happening?
my husband and Kyle.
So Kyle had come and sat back down.
Yes.
And at that time, you didn't see Marissa.
No.
How much longer did you stay at that party?
Maybe 30 minutes, 45 minutes while we cleaned up.
And about what time did you end up
About 6:30, almost 7 o'clock.
in the morning?
Yes, the sun was coming out when we were getting ready to leave.
And and maybe you could track yourself backwards. About what time do you think that this happened? The argument and the promotion?
About 6.
About 6? Did anybody from the San Antonio Police Department come out to speak with you?
No,
Did anybody call you and look for your version of the events?
no.
Tell this jury, who were the sober people at that party? People that had not drank at all
When the commotion happened,
throughout the whole night.
myself, my aunt Guadalupe, and her daughters,
Everybody
Perla and Lucy.
everybody else was drinking.
Everybody else that was there was still drinking. Kyle's parents didn't stay. They ate dinner, they had cake, and then they left. And so did his friends from the army.
No one has ever asked you to recount this story.
Object to leading.
Sustained.
Have you ever recounted this story to anyone other than me?
No,
Do you continue to speak with Marissa?
yes,
Do you have anything against her?
no,
All right.
Do you have anything against her?
no.
In fact, explain to the jury what your relationship with Marissa is.
She's my friend, my cousin's old girlfriend. We were at her birthday party on Sunday. At her daughter's birthday party on Sunday.
You wouldn't lie against her, would you? To
I'm sorry?
protect your uncle? You wouldn't lie today to protect your uncle?
No,
You're telling these people exactly what you saw on that day.
yes.
I'll pass it to you.
State.
Okay. Okay, Maggie, is that you go by?
That's fine.
When did you first meet Marissa?
I met her on her birthday in August
Of 2020?
of 2020.
Did you consider her to be close with, your extended family?
Close to us? Yes.
Can you, I believe you testified that it was Kyle's 30th birthday. It was a dirty 30 party, right?
Correct.
Were you involved in the party planning for that at all?
Yes, I took the cake.
Okay.
It was a butt.
Were there like condoms there?
Yes.
Okay, what other kind of dirty 30, maybe inappropriate things were there?
I think there was lube and condoms, if I'm not mistaken.
And you said you were not drinking alcohol that night.
No.
Did you pay Marissa to do your makeup?
No.
But you don't remember if Marissa was drinking while she was doing your makeup?
No.
But it took about an hour and a half?
Yes.
And then when you left the bedroom, you said that it took Marissa a while to come out.
Yes.
Was it enough time to take a nap?
No.
And when you went out there, you testified that you didn't really remember who was all outside when you went outside first, right?
When I went outside first, no.
And was it dark outside when you went out?
When I went out, I don't think so. Maybe getting dark, not dark yet.
Okay, so if the official sunset that day was 7:09 p.m., then you probably would have left the room before the sunset. Is that fair to say?
I left the room before the sunset. I think it was setting already. Like I said, it wasn't dark, but it was not light outside.
Okay,
Mhm.
but it could have been closer to 7,
Yes.
but you're not sure.
Exact time, no.
You testified that you, Lucy and Perla, you never saw them go inside.
No.
Okay. Were you paying attention to that?
The only ones that are always inside are the kids. They always stay and hang out with us.
Okay, but I mean, they probably use the restroom, right?
Oh yeah, everybody gets up to go to the bathroom.
Okay, but you didn't like keep track of like when people were going, right?
No,
Like there was no reason for you to do that, right?
correct.
So it's really hard to say that they never went to like hang out with the children for any extended period of time.
For an extended period of time, no.
And then the shots, you said they were rum chata and fireball.
Yes.
Okay, so it was like a mix.
No, it was first it was both and then it was mixed.
Okay, okay. Who bought the beer that night?
I assume Kyle and Ray, but everybody brings beer. We show up to anybody's house and we walk in with a case of beer.
So how are you keeping track of how many drinks people have?
Because ice chests are empty by the time we're done, by the time we go to bed.
Okay. Did you know how many drinks were in there initially?
No,
Do you remember seeing Marissa get beers for herself?
yes, when she served herself food, I know she grabbed a beer.
So you saw Marissa eat.
Yes,
Do you remember what dinner was that night?
I believe it was barbecue, like ribs.
Could it have been chicken fajitas?
Not that I remember chicken fight.
So. If you don't know how many beers were in the cooler to start with, and you didn't like count what exactly was drinking, like you really don't know how much people had to drink.
No,
Okay, but just that by the end, did you see the cooler at the end of the night?
I don't check the coolers at the end of the night.
Okay, so you don't know if it was empty.
No, but at the end of the night, they start drinking slower because there's less beer.
Okay. Well, but you don't like, you testified that Marissa had over 10 beers, but you don't really know that.
No, I don't know exactly how many beers anybody had.
And did you keep count of how many rounds of shots there were?
At the beginning, I was, but
But-
after so many, I stopped counting.
So you said ate dinner around 8 o'clock. And then cake around 10 p.m., right?
Yes,
Why wasn't the defendant, Ray's father, there?
he was working.
He owns a mechanic shop, right?
Correct. He's always late to all the parties. Even at his own house.
You said Marissa was loud and drunk. You said around 10 o'clock.
Yes. After cake.
After the cake. And then you said from 10 o'clock, she was just talking, hanging out, drinking. Was it mostly beers from that point on?
No, that for after the cake is when the shots came out.
And then, okay, so you said that Marissa went to bed around 2:30,
About 2:30, 3 o'clock.
2:30, 3 o'clock.
Yes,
Okay,
because my uncle got there at 2 and then my aunt left maybe about 2:30 and she went to bed after.
okay, so how are you so certain that Marissa had not gone to bed when the defendant got there?
Had not gone to bed before he got there. Because she was still out there with us.
All right, could you please remember to keep your voice up so everybody can hear?
Okay,
Thank you.
Okay. So you testified that he got there around 2 or 2:30 and that Marissa went to bed around 2:30 or 3.
yes,
So it's fair to say it was a short period of time.
yes.
And what did the defendant do when he got there?
He said, he ran around the table, said hi to everybody, and then he sat down and had dinner.
Was he drinking?
Yes,
What did he drink?
that one I'm not sure. He had his own bucket with beer.
He brought his own alcohol.
Yes,
Was he drinking before he came?
I do not know.
Was it normal for him to come by himself to parties?
Yes, if at all, because not all the time he would show up.
You testified earlier that you, and I put quotes, I don't think Marissa stopped drinking. So by those words, I don't think, you're not certain.
Correct.
And you testified that you didn't see Ray with Marissa going to the room until you were actually in the room, right?
Yes,
So, how did you know to go get your stuff?
because he said, we need to take you to bed.
And Marissa agreed with that, right?
Correct.
And so when he said that, you got up to get your stuff.
Correct.
You didn't see Marissa stand up.
No, he was getting her up from the chair.
And when you were walking to the room, there was nobody in the hallway, right?
No,
And so you get in the room and you said your son and Benny,
Malachi.
Malachi, were playing games on the floor,
Yes,
and you asked them to leave.
I asked my son to leave.
Did they both leave?
And no, I took my son out first.
Okay, but Malachi came.
Malachi stayed behind when I pulled my son out.
When Marissa went onto the bed, you said that she went down and then she turned over. Can you explain for the jury how she was situated on the bed?
She was, when Ray laid her down, she was laying up. And
He
when
laid her on the back.
on her back,
On her back, and then how did she turn?
she turned to her left side towards the wall.
Okay, so she turned towards the wall.
Yes,
And you said that her butt was showing.
yes.
Um,
When she turned, she moved her leg upwards, so her skirt rises even higher.
okay. But nobody pulled her, like her skirt wasn't pulled up to her like chest or waist area, was it?
No,
Okay, it was at where it was supposed to be. It's just the flap of the skirt had moved up.
it's not a flap, it's a mini, like a tight skin, yes.
Yeah, I don't know what to call
The
it.
fabric.
The actual fabric of the skirt just kind of moved up like it does, but the where the waist would sit on the skirt was still where it was supposed to be.
I assume, yes.
Okay, so you testified that it was about, so at some point Marissa comes out and you said she had the blanket
Correct.
and she wasn't talking.
No,
And that she went back in and it was about an hour later when the confrontation happened, right? You also said that in that time Kyle had gone back to throw up again.
yes.
Okay, so my question is, it was once Kyle went in to throw up and Kyle came back out.
Yes.
How long was it before that confrontation?
When Kyle came back out, not even 5 minutes. Kyle came out, he came to the door first, he called Check-It inside. Check-It stayed inside, and then Kyle came out and sat. And then Check-It came out the front door.
Okay. Have you ever seen? Well, let me ask you this.
Just a moment. Do we need to switch out? Thank you.
Yes.
You're welcome. Does anyone need a break? Okay, see, you all need to use the symbol. All right, so we're gonna take a short recess. If I have everyone back here at 3, is that enough time for everyone? Because that'll give them enough time to switch out. So remember my instructions, no investigation, no looking at anything. If you see anything, disregard, no deliberating in your head or with each other. All right, everyone, please rise for the jurors. Deputy, could you mute us? All right, so we'll just let everyone switch off. Rulers. go. I appreciate you. Yeah. All right, we are back on the record. And we have a new interpreter. If you could raise your right hand for me, please. Do you solemnly swear or affirm you will faithfully translate from English into Spanish and Spanish into English, so help you God? All right, you can lower your hand if you'll state your name for the record. All right, thank you for coming. We're ready.
All right, for the jury.
All right, everyone, please be seated. All right, you may continue.
Okay. See. I believe you said on direct examination that you did not remember the time it was that Kyle went to throw up the second time, correct?
Correct.
So. You testified that Marissa looked spaced out, in your opinion.
Yes.
Would it make? This allegation has torn the family apart, right?
Their household, yes.
And this kind of allegation on its face is one that probably would do that.
No, I'm gonna object to the relevance of this line of question.
Sustain.
If she was sitting there contemplating what to do, would she not look a little spaced out?
No, I'm gonna object to relevance and requesting, asking for speculative answer.
Sustained.
Do you have any medical training?
Any medical training?
Medical training?
No.
Is it safe to say that you've never seen anybody in shock?
Besides that night?
Yes.
Yes.
And it's possible she was in shock.
Objection, Your Honor, asking for speculative answer.
Sustained.
So you saw Marissa go in, you testified, and you didn't see her again after that.
Correct.
And you saw Kyle come out and summon Ray to go in.
Correct.
And then you saw someone pacing inside the house
Before Kyle came out
the second time, right?
the second time.
So you're saying that,
Marissa went inside.
Right.
Kyle went inside to throw up. And then somebody was pacing.
okay,
And then Kyle came out, called Ray. And then Ray back inside, Kyle outside.
so you saw someone pacing in the house, but you don't know who it was?
Correct.
May I approach?
Yes.
If you would, pointing to State's Exhibit number 10. Would you kind of put an X where you were situated outside the house?
In the carport about right here.
It didn't show up. Can you do it a little harder? Oh, okay. Oh, I see it now.
Under where it says carport.
Blind. Okay. And so where from that vantage point, where can you see in the house that someone was pacing?
In the living room, this window here was open
Okay, and where were they pacing?
towards like this side. I would see them come out of this wall, come back in, come back out.
Okay, so they were going from one side of the brick wall to the other.
Towards the door.
And how long were they pacing for?
I'm not sure exactly how long.
And that's right next to where Ray and Marissa were staying, right?
Yes. It was before the hallway, yes.
So when was the first time you saw Ray and it was obvious to you that he was upset?
When he came back out.
But again, the pacing occurred before Lyle had come out and told Ray to come inside. That's what you just testified to, correct?
Yes,
So Ray was outside
yes,
when you saw the pacing.
yes.
Now, when the confrontation started, you said the children were inside.
Yes,
Were they asleep?
yes.
Where did they sleep?
The boys in the living room and the girls in Layla's room. The kids' room.
And you heard yelling, right?
Outside.
Whose voices could you identify were yelling?
Who did I see yelling? Because they were yelling in front of me.
Oh, okay.
The yelling, the confrontation was outside. Ray came out the front door, and then that's when after, first it was Carol and then it was Ray.
There were accusations being shouted, correct?
I'm gonna check your honor, this is request, asking for your hearsay.
Sustain.
Was the defendant saying anything?
No,
Did you ever hear him say anything?
no,
Did you hear him admit to anything?
Your honor, I'm gonna object, asking for, hearsay response.
Right, that'll be overruled.
I didn't hear the answer.
Overruled.
From the.
no.
Oh, she didn't answer.
Are you aware that Carol and Kyle spoke to police?
Yes,
Are you aware that they corroborated that there was about 13 minutes when the defendant had gone inside the house?
Your honor, I'm objecting to the relevance of this line of questioning.
The objection as to relevance, that will be overruled.
that there was 13 minutes. Can you repeat that?
Are you aware that they were able to corroborate that there was a 13-minute period where the defendant had gone inside the house alone?
No,
Pass the witness, Jenny.
I have no further questions.
All right, is this witness excused or subject for recall?
Excuse you.
She's excused, Your Honor, from the state.
All right, the rule that's been invoked, what that means is you can't discuss your testimony with anyone. The only persons you're allowed to speak to are attorneys for the state of the defense. Do you understand? Yeah. All right, you can step down.
Thank you.
All right, defense, call your next witness.
Your Honor, the defense rests.
State,
Yeah, I could send the statement rest.
defense, do you close? All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is what is going to happen. I'm gonna have you here on Monday, not Saturday or Sunday, but Monday at 9 a.m. And at 9 a.m., what's going to happen is the jury charge will be read. And then both parties will have a chance to give closing arguments to you, and then you will be allowed to deliberate. So you'll have Monday or as long as you need to do that. And that way you can start fresh in the morning. Remember my instructions. You're not allowed to discuss this case with anyone. If you see anything, be it on any type of media, ignore it. If someone tries to speak to you about it, ignore it. Do not do any of your investigation. Everything that you need to know about this case comes from inside the courtroom, and there's to be no deliberation. Does everyone understand? All right, so I will see you all back here. Well, I won't. Judge Angelini will be here on Monday at 9 a.m. So he will be here at 9, and he will be the person who will read the jury charge to you and preside for the remaining of this trial. All right. I'm not going to be here because I have to take care of some matters with my mom. So that's why I won't be here. Otherwise, I would be. But thank you so much for your patience. And it's the weekend. I always tell everyone, be careful out there, okay? All right, everyone, please rise for the jurors. Oh, you can take the pillow or you can leave the pillow. Yes. It's yours.